The silent tears streaming down the face of Justin Combs, a man who once lived in the limelight and wealth, marked the moment he was forced to face a harsh truth. Nothing could protect him from the weight of reality. Growing up surrounded by fame and power, Justin never imagined that he would have to face such a serious situation. But then, in the tense courtroom, when the accusations rang out, no one thought this was just an ordinary case. It was the moment he realized he was being pulled into a vortex that he himself did not fully understand why. The love of family, once a safe place, now became an unanswerable question. What made everything change so much? Was it a connection to a past he always believed he had avoided? Or was it a misunderstanding that could not be undone? When the courtroom doors closed, what he faced was not just a judgment from the law, but a confrontation with his own beliefs, honor, and future. And perhaps the most heartbreaking thing was that he had to look back at everything he thought he knew about his family, about himself, and began to ask the question, is it really true? Justin Combs. From a life of privilege to the attention of federal agencies, Justin Combs, now 30, has spent much of his life in the shadow of his entertainment icon father. As the heir to one of America's largest entertainment empires, Justin has lived a life that few would imagine. Yet he has maintained a remarkable degree of privacy compared to his father's fame and media exposure. Born into wealth and fame, Justin attended top private schools before earning a prestigious football scholarship to UCLA, where he played linebacker for the Bruins from 2012 to 2015. Justin's athletic success has allowed him to forge an identity separate from his father's image as a businessman and entertainer. After graduating with a degree in sociology, Justin began appearing more frequently at entertainment events and gradually became involved in the family business, including the Bad Boy Entertainment empire. This move brought him closer to the heart of the family business, marking a new step in his personal and professional journey. Justin's presence during the FBI raid on his father's estate on March 25, 2024, made him a person of particular interest. He was questioned by federal agents during the inspection of the Los Angeles property, raising questions about his role and level of knowledge of the family business. Although no formal charges were filed, Justin's presence at the event placed him at the center of attention, especially as the investigation focused on activities described as concerning by federal agencies. The scope of a federal investigation can extend from the primary suspects to those who are close and business or personal. In RICO cases, investigators often expand their scope to investigate the entire structure of the suspected organization. This can include family members, partners, or associates, regardless of their level of active or conscious involvement in the business. A comprehensive review is part of a legal strategy to determine liability, if any. The charges relate to a period from 2008 to the present, which coincides with when Justin came of age and began to participate in the family business. While no conclusions have been reached, authorities have the authority to expand their investigation to anyone involved if there is evidence of active participation in activities deemed to be shady. In that context, family relationships are not always sufficient to completely separate them from the investigative process, especially when law enforcement agencies are looking into the internal workings of a large business system. Precedents for family members facing charges in RICO cases include multiple instances of children, spouses, and relatives being prosecuted separately based on their alleged role in the activities of the business under investigation. In some cases, federal prosecutors have used the ability to prosecute family members as a strategic negotiating tool to pressure the primary defendant into reaching plea deals, legal experts say. This not only puts individuals in a difficult position, but also has far-reaching effects on the relationships and mental structures of the entire family during the investigation. The psychological tug-of-war between family loyalty and the need for self-preservation is one of the most complex elements of federal criminal investigations. According to criminal psychology research, relatives of the main defendant may face intense pressure when asked to cooperate, especially when it may result in legal consequences for their loved ones. The choice between loyal silence and truthful testimony is a complex internal struggle, especially in cases where family ties are closely tied to personal identity. Justin Combs has always expressed a close relationship and admiration for his father, both for his business achievements and his personal direction. That emotional attachment adds to the tension of any decision that may affect the father-son relationship. When an individual who has been sheltered as a close family member becomes the subject of a federal investigation, the emotional toll can be enormous, especially for someone who has never faced serious legal consequences before. Cooperation agreements in federal investigations often require a high level of transparency and disclosure of all activities involved, even those that may have previously been considered harmless or private. This forces family members to weigh the need to protect their loved ones against the need to avoid serious penalties for themselves. Psychological barriers such as loyalty, fear of loss, or the risk of being isolated from close-knit communities can make the decision to cooperate particularly difficult and stressful. Justin's role in the family business has become increasingly visible since he left college. From attending industry events to participating in strategy meetings, Justin has gradually established himself in the business network led by his father. This development has helped him advance further in the entertainment industry, while also giving him greater access to operations that could attract the attention of investigators. The entertainment industry is a complex, interwoven business of creative and financial operations, where multiple family members are not uncommon. With Justin's increasingly visible role in these operations, he may have created the documentary trail that federal investigators are looking for. What raises questions is not just the extent of his involvement, but also how his past business actions can be interpreted through the lens of current law. The reality of federal court security reflects a carefully designed system designed to ensure maximum order and safety during highly sensitive criminal trials. Trials involving high-profile defendants or cases that receive significant media attention are typically held in facilities with the highest security standards. The Southern District of New York, where Diddy's case is being heard, is known as one of the most secure and rigorous federal judicial systems in the United States. Comprehensive security screenings and professional security personnel are deployed to prevent any potential risks during the trial. For family members of high-profile defendants, the security system extends to threat assessments, access control, and close coordination with law enforcement to ensure safety and privacy. The U.S. Marshals Service plays a key role in courtroom security, with staff trained to handle sensitive situations that may arise in cases that attract significant public attention. When a criminal case reaches a critical level and attracts significant attention, security measures are adjusted to meet the protection needs of all involved, from the defendant to family members and attorneys. The federal courtroom environment often places a great deal of psychological pressure on everyone in attendance, especially family members of the defendant, as they witness the intense proceedings against their loved one. The solemn atmosphere of the courtroom, combined with the complexity and seriousness of the charges, can be overwhelming for individuals unfamiliar with the legal system. In the case of Justin Combs, his presence in court as a relative of the defendant and someone who may be indirectly affected by the outcome of the investigation created complex emotions as he had to deal with the reality of his father while also considering his own legal position. The intense media and public attention added to the pressure on family members attending the trial, forcing them to control their emotions while their every move could be recorded and analyzed. The presence of cameras, journalists, and social media turned every reaction, no matter how small, into a larger public narrative. Legal experts note that the emotional stress and mental pressure can significantly influence an individual's decision-making regarding offers to cooperate, testify, or how to respond to the prosecution's strategies during the trial. Historical precedent in RICO prosecutions involving families shows that blood ties do not confer immunity when there is evidence of intentional participation in the alleged criminal enterprise. In many cases, federal prosecutors have successfully brought charges against the children, spouses, or relatives of the primary defendant, especially when there is a connection between these members and the family business under investigation. A notable example is the John Gotti Jr. case, where the prosecution argued that the actions of the mafia boss's son, even if based on his father's direction, constituted active participation. Such cases have become important references in how to handle situations with family elements, especially when the business under investigation has been operating for a long time and has a complex structure. In recent years, RICO has been applied not only to traditional criminal organizations, but also to modern businesses that appear legitimate but are accused of being fronts for illegal activities. A number of cases involving the entertainment industry have demonstrated that participation in business activities, even legal ones, can be considered under RICO if investigators believe that they facilitate criminal activity. In this context, Justin's involvement in his family's business empire raises questions about the line between executive roles and perceived legality of the activities involved. While no specific conclusions have been reached, legal precedent suggests that individuals involved may be subject to increased scrutiny during investigations. The heavy media coverage of high-profile federal cases can blur the line between legal reality and how the individuals involved are perceived by the public. Even those who are not charged can become the focus of analysis and speculation, especially when they are close to the main defendants. Justin's case, as the son of a prominent figure, illustrates this. Every action in court and its aftermath can easily become the subject of debate in the media and on social media. Meanwhile, the complex legal aspects of the federal justice system are often reduced to sensational headlines, which can create serious misunderstandings about the nature of the case. The public's attention to emotional moments in the courtroom or dramatic situations highlighted by the media can lead to misinterpretations of the proceedings. The emphasis on personal reactions, rather than the substance of the proceedings, can influence how the public views the individuals involved, legal observers say. This raises questions about the extent to which the media will influence all parties involved, from prosecutors to future juries. For Justin, his presence in the current legal landscape means that every move and every public expression is likely to be viewed not only from a personal perspective, but also from a broader societal lens. The impact of a federal investigation on personal and professional lives can be long-lasting and profound, far beyond what happens in the courtroom. Beyond the legal implications, individuals in the spotlight of government attention can face significant consequences for their reputations, relationships, career opportunities, and financial stability. In Justin's case, any developments in the case involving his father could impact how he is perceived in the entertainment industry and in his social circles, regardless of whether the investigation results in charges. Whether or not Justin is formally charged, his involvement in the federal criminal investigation could have a significant impact on his music career and business operations. In a climate of legal tension, business partners and collaborators often tend to distance themselves to avoid any image or legal risks. This could significantly weaken the professional network Justin has built over the years. When an individual becomes the subject of federal attention, not only their career, but also their social and business relationships may be affected by concerns from those around them. Furthermore, if Justin's assets or financial interests are scrutinized during the investigation, they could face the risk of being frozen or seized if they are found to be of dubious origin, directly threatening his long-term financial stability. In addition to the legal factors, the emotional impacts, from anxiety to feelings of insecurity, can also have a profound impact on personal lives, intimate relationships, and day-to-day work performance. In cases with a family component such as RICO, defense teams often face a combination of legal and psychological challenges. Defending a client is not only about the legal aspects, but also requires sensitivity to intra-family relationships, which can play a significant role in the long-term mental health and emotional stability of the person involved. The decision to cooperate with federal prosecutors requires a careful assessment of the legal factors, potential benefits, and the potential impact on reputation and relationships. Legal strategies for family members often revolve around distinguishing between family loyalty and criminal intent, and building an argument that any involvement, if any, was not intentional. Timing is key, as opportunities to cooperate are often only offered in the early stages of an investigation before specific charges are filed. The question is, what strategy Justin's legal team will choose to both protect his legal interests and satisfy prosecutors if there are concerns about his involvement. Options may include negotiating a cooperation agreement, requesting a waiver, or clarifying the lines between his personal and family business roles. In federal investigations, especially high-profile ones, cooperation agreements are often seen as a useful tool to avoid prosecution, but they come with significant psychological costs. Providing detailed information about a loved one or former associate is often accompanied by feelings of guilt, confusion, and lingering internal conflict. Federal cooperation agreements require a high level of honesty and often do not tolerate ambiguity or inconsistency, making the decision to participate an extremely heavy psychological burden. Individuals must be willing to share everything they know about activities that could be considered illegal, including information about loved ones, co-workers, or past associates. Requests for full cooperation often result in extensive and thorough questioning, forcing participants to confront sensitive memories or experiences. Emotionally, the choice between protecting oneself or protecting a loved one can be a significant challenge. Legal experts note that while a partnership agreement can have legal benefits, it can also leave lasting scars on personal relationships, especially in families that are deeply connected or have a long history of companionship. Broader implications for entertainment families. The Diddy case is becoming a clear example of a growing trend in how federal law enforcement is handling allegations of criminal activity in the entertainment industry, especially when there is a close connection between the business and family members. The increased focus by investigators on the role of relatives in business operations could pose new challenges for prominent and wealthy families. Successful prosecutions could have a ripple effect, prompting individuals to come forward and encouraging broader investigations into the inner workings of the industry. This raises the question, should existing business structures be adjusted to protect family members from legal risk, especially in sensitive professional environments? The fallout from such cases could lead to a reorganization of how entertainment families operate their businesses and manage responsibilities among their members. If cases like these establish new legal standards, it could change the way wealthy families strategize their businesses, separating their personal and business roles to minimize risks to family members. In this process, psychological support becomes indispensable. Tense legal situations can put a lot of pressure on families, especially when members have to make personal decisions, such as whether to cooperate with authorities, even when doing so may go against family loyalties. The psychological impact of federal investigations can extend far beyond the courtroom or formal legal proceedings. Anxiety, depression, feelings of disorientation, all of these reactions are common among involved family members, regardless of whether they are prosecuted. Mental health professionals say specialized support such as individual counseling, family therapy, and legal consultation are essential to help individuals maintain emotional stability during times of uncertainty. After the legal proceedings are over, the process of restoring trust and rebuilding family relationships often requires long-term intervention and support. Looking ahead, as prosecutors continue to build their cases, many questions remain, particularly whether the scope of the investigation will expand to include other family members. Federal RICO cases often unfold over many years, with the extended timeline leaving those involved in a state of uncertainty. Legal experts note that these cases rarely stay within their original scope. New evidence can lead to additional defendants or expanded charges. This makes it difficult to predict the outcome, especially when family members are seen as having a role, either directly or indirectly, in the activities under investigation. Ultimately, the outcome of this case could set an important legal precedent for how law enforcement approaches family business structures in the entertainment industry. It raises a larger question. Should other wealthy families operating in the entertainment industry take stronger legal precautions to protect themselves and their loved ones? As the investigation continues, the entertainment industry in particular and families with insider business models in general may be forced to reevaluate and adjust their operations to better suit an era of increased regulatory scrutiny. Thank you for taking the time to watch today's video. We appreciate your interest and support. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any future updates. Elvis Presley, the immortal icon of world music, is not only remembered for his classic hits, but also for his mysterious private life behind the gates of Graceland. Among the stories told and untold, there is a silent witness, Mrs. Nancy Rooks, the maid who worked at Graceland for more than 10 years. For a long time, she kept everything she witnessed a secret. No sharing, no interviews, but in the last days of her life, she decided to share her deepest memories of Elvis, not as a star, but as a person with his own worries and hidden corners. What Nancy revealed surprised many fans, not because of its sensational nature, but because it brought a more realistic and intimate look at the king of rock and roll. Behind the halo, did Elvis have any untold stories? Here's what one person who was there told me. And what she shared changed the way many people saw Elvis Presley. The quiet woman behind the doors of Graceland. Before it became a tourist destination with velvet ropes, tours, and souvenir shops, Graceland was a home, lively, sometimes chaotic. And at the center of that home was a woman few in the public eye ever knew, Nancy Rooks. She didn't wear glitter, she wasn't a singer, and she never graced the cover of a magazine. But for the most important 10 years, from 1967 until Elvis's death in 1977, and even after, Nancy was part of a life behind the scenes that the audience never saw. She didn't come from showbiz connections or Hollywood connections. Nancy came to Graceland on a whim, a temporary job through an agency, filling in for someone who was absent due to health reasons. But Elvis's father, Vernon Presley, saw something in her professionalism, calmness, and reliability, and he asked her to stay. What started as a short-term help turned into a full-time job in one of the most famous homes in America. Nancy was initially assigned to cleaning duties, but the role quickly grew. She became Elvis's personal chef, cooking his favorite Southern dishes. From peanut butter and banana sandwiches, fried pickles, to meatballs and cornbread, Nancy did it all, especially late at night because Elvis lived at his own pace. He slept late, ate late, and partied until the wee hours of the morning. Nancy adjusted her schedule to accommodate. Her shifts often started at 5 p.m. and lasted until the wee hours of the morning. It was around this time that Elvis appeared, sometimes barefoot, sometimes in slippers, his hair tousled, sometimes smiling, sometimes pensive. But Nancy was not just a waitress. She saw a very different Elvis, not the musical icon, not the legend, but the person. An Elvis Presley in a frock with sudden cravings who asked simple questions like, "Do you have peach pie?" who sometimes needed company and sometimes just silence. Nancy was one of the few people who truly understood the difference between Elvis Presley, the public icon, and Elvis, the man behind the scenes. Perhaps it was that understanding that made him trust her. Nancy had seen the crowds that came and went in and out of Graceland, celebrities, bodyguards, girlfriends, friends from his humble beginnings. She had seen how many people tried to please Elvis and how many depended on him, but she had also seen the quiet moments when the house was empty and he seemed exhausted after the crowds had gone. There were nights when Graceland was quiet, and Elvis asked Nancy to join him and his grandmother, Minnie May, in singing hymns. No performances, no lights, just soft singing in the cozy kitchen. Nancy didn't gossip. She didn't seek fame or profit. Even when many others began to exploit Elvis's name, Nancy remained silent. When fans wrote to ask about the real Elvis, she responded with kindness, always pausing. "He was very kind," she said, "funny and generous." And that was usually it. It wasn't until years later that Nancy decided to tell her side of the story, in her own honest voice in books like The Maid, The Man, and The Fans, and Inside Graceland. But even then, her accounts were guarded with dignity and restraint. They weren't sensational revelations, but honest slices of a life that had been lived. These were rare memories, shared by someone who had no reason to exaggerate. In the book, Nancy describes daily routines, everyday moments, even the fateful day of Elvis's death, all in a gentle, affectionate voice. It was that simplicity and rusticity that made fans appreciate it, because it brought an image of Elvis that was closer and more sympathetic than any documentary. However, even in those pages, there were still things Nancy did not say. Maybe because of loyalty, maybe because of fear of being misunderstood, or simply there were truths that were easier to keep than to say. Nancy Rooks never appeared in the spotlight. She was not the center of attention. But she was there, in the living room, on the stairs, in the kitchen, along the corridors of Graceland, every day just a few steps away from history. And then, as time passed, as the legend of Elvis became bigger than his life, Nancy kept that memory to herself, quietly, deeply, and more trustworthy than all the rumors. Only at the end of her life did she gently open the door of that memory and share what the world thought it would never hear. The last days at Graceland. In the summer of 1977, the atmosphere inside Graceland began to change dramatically. There was still laughter and music every night, but beneath the familiar bustle was a strange feeling, something unnameable. The energy in the house seemed thinner, more tense. Elvis was no longer himself, at least not completely. He was heavy, quiet, withdrawn, and sometimes visibly tired. But he kept going, kept moving. He had tours planned, plans to return to the stage. Many people forgot that Elvis was actually preparing for a long trip. Nancy Rooks noticed every little detail, the way he sat down more slowly than before, the erratic changes in his appetite. Some nights he wanted to eat a full meal, other nights he drank only water or juice. The upstairs bathroom had become his sanctuary, a personal space that no one would invade unless absolutely necessary. But even when he was not disturbed, everyone in the house took note of his time there. Not just for privacy, but because it was where he sought solitude, away from it all. Elvis had always had a particular routine. His sleep was irregular. Some nights he would wake up at 3 a.m., watch TV or play racquetball, then go to sleep when it was light. Nancy adjusted to that rhythm, sometimes breakfast at midnight, sometimes dinner at dawn. But in those final days, things were even more unpredictable. Elvis became restless. One moment he was happy with friends, the next he was pensive, pacing the hallway as if something was weighing on his mind. On his last day, Elvis played racquetball on the private court at Graceland, a detail that has become a familiar timeline in every story. But what few people remember is that the day went by in a completely normal way. He was not bedridden. He did not show signs of exhaustion. On the contrary, he was still walking, talking, playing, sweating after the game, laughing with the bodyguards in the kitchen, as if everything was going on as usual. There was no sign that it would be the last time. It was that normality that made the moment all the more heartbreaking. Nancy remembered very clearly the early morning of August 16th. Elvis had just returned from playing, standing on the steps near the kitchen, tired but alert. She asked him as usual, "Do you want anything to eat, Elvis?" He shook his head. "No, I don't want anything to eat right now. I just want to sleep a little, but I want some water." She asked Pauline to bring him water, the plastic jug with a handle that was used to hold orange juice. The moment seemed simple, but Pauline remembered it clearly. Elvis picked up the water bottle and took a long, quick drink, as if he had been thirsty for a long time. I had never seen him drink water like that, Pauline recalled. Nancy had just smiled and reassured him. Maybe he was just tired. He had just played racquetball. But now, looking back, that small moment felt special, not because it was tragic, but because it was so ordinary. A simple request, a final act of care from the woman who had been with Elvis for years. No touching goodbyes, no dramatic scenes, just a glass of water, what he needed at that moment. And then he went upstairs. That morning, Ginger Alden found Elvis in the bathroom, motionless. The house was strangely quiet. Then came the chaos, the urgent calls, the hurried footsteps, the screams, the sense of confusion that filled Graceland. But for Nancy, the sound that resonated most was not the noise. It was the echo of a simple request, the last words he had ever said to her. It seemed so small, but it contained the hope that, at least for that moment, he would be okay. That Nancy had never mentioned, until now. In the decades since Elvis Presley's death, Nancy Rooks has remained one of the most respected voices from within Graceland, but also one of the most private. While others have shared their stories, written books, given interviews, sometimes for fame or profit, Nancy has chosen to remain silent. Not because she had nothing to say. On the contrary, she knew more than most. But she held the memories as if they were fragile glass. There were some things, she believed, that were not meant for the public. At least not yet. In the years that followed, Nancy gave a few interviews. She wrote books, but even when she spoke, she held herself with rare discretion. No sensationalism, no embellishment. She did not turn Elvis into a tragic icon, nor did she make him surreal. She maintained a clear line between her personal memories and her public narrative. Her books, like Inside Graceland, showed a very real, very human Elvis, but always with respect and restraint, always restrained, always keeping the deepest things to herself. Readers did not find shocking revelations. Instead, they came away with a warm, honest feeling. Nancy did not try to prove anything. She did not retaliate, did not speak out to justify or affirm anything to anyone. But behind closed doors, there were things she never wrote down. Things that weren't on television. Things that haunted her, looks, words that seemed fleeting but never left her memory. And over time, those details began to shift in weight in her mind. Not because she needed attention, but because she began to feel like time was running out. She realized that if she didn't speak up, no one else would be there to tell the truth. In her later years, Nancy became quieter. Friends noticed that she occasionally mentioned things that, she said, people never really knew about Elvis. There was no resentment, no bitterness, just a quiet, urgent feeling. She began to talk more openly about the pills. How many, how often, not in a careless way, but as a system. Although Elvis always had doctors by his side, Nancy felt that he was not being cared for properly. It felt more like he was being managed, controlled, than healed. Nancy never said that Elvis wanted to give up. On the contrary, she insisted that he had no intention of doing so, but she believed that something important was being misunderstood. He wasn't ready to go, she once whispered to a friend. He was tired, exhausted, but still there, still trying. The turning point came at a small gathering when someone gently asked, "Is there anything you'd like to say publicly about Elvis?" Nancy was silent. Then she said softly, "I don't think he died the way they say. Not quite." Not a conspiracy theory, not a hint of a fake death or a cover-up, but another layer of meaning, deeper, more subtle. That the story that had been told and retold for decades, Elvis succumbing to drugs and illness, had missed something, had simplified a very complex man, one who had struggled, yes, but one who was also planning, considering change, one who just days before had talked about quietly retreating, starting over, somewhere far away from Graceland. Nancy had never said any of this publicly, but in the final months, she began to open up. One listener called it a gentle release, as if she had held her breath for more than 40 years and was finally able to exhale. Nancy wasn't trying to rewrite history, but what she did, gently, deliberately, was add a missing piece, another side of the story, a whisper at the edge of memory, a reminder that perhaps we never really knew Elvis Presley. And then what she said next, in her own words, changed everything. Not a press conference, not a groundbreaking announcement, not even to the world. But in a private conversation recorded just months before her death, Nancy Rooks, the devoted housekeeper, trusted cook, and silent witness to Elvis Presley's life, finally said what she had kept hidden. With age softening her voice, but her memory as sharp as ever, Nancy spoke with astonishing clarity. Elvis was not the man people thought he was. He was not a lost man coming to an end, and he did not die the way people say he died. For decades, Nancy had answered questions politely, never seeking to stir up controversy. She was known as a quiet, loyal witness to the tumultuous years at Graceland. But then, something changed. Maybe it was because death had come closer to her. Maybe it was because she had lived longer than most who had ever walked through the mansion. Or, as she herself admitted, it was simply time to speak. This time, as she recounted her last morning with Elvis, each word seemed heavier, imbued with something she had never shared. "Elvis didn't say much that day," she began. "He just asked for water. Not food, just water. But he drank it like he hadn't had a drink in days." The moment haunted her. He was tired, obviously, but in his eyes that morning she saw something else. A vague will, as if he were trying to start over. And then Nancy said something that silenced the room. "I always thought he was sick, but now I'm telling you the truth. Elvis wasn't ready to die." People leaned toward her, unsure if they'd heard her correctly. But she continued, more slowly and firmly. "He used to tell me he wanted to get away, not from people, but from the name Elvis. From the noise, from the lights. I just want to be a man again," he told me. "A normal man, in a quiet place. That's not what people say when they've given up." Nancy also mentioned a detail that few people noticed: Elvis's upstairs bookshelf. It contained books on spirituality, health, inner transformation. He was looking for something, she said. Not drugs anymore, change. She believes Elvis was slowly realizing the extent to which he was being controlled, surrounded by people who no longer listened to him as a person. "I'm not pretending he wasn't suffering," she said. "He was in pain. He was betrayed by people he trusted. His sleep was disturbed. He was bloated. He was on all those drugs, yes. I'm not saying he was healthy, but I'm saying he was trying, and that was important." Nancy's voice was low, but firm. "People say he overdosed, but I think he was exhausted, not just physically, but mentally, and that's what made the difference. He wasn't reckless that day. He wasn't delirious. He just wanted to sleep." Then she added a memory she had never shared with anyone. "A few days before he died, he asked me, 'Do you believe that people can start over?' I said, 'Of course, if they want to.' He was quiet for a moment, then said, 'Maybe I will. One day I'll wake up and leave it all behind. Just disappear.' He laughed, as if he were joking. But Nancy, all these years later, wondered how much truth there was in that joke. Those who were there that day recall, there was no drama in her voice, no tears, no resentment, just a finale, gentle, profound, from a woman who washed sheets, folded shirts, cooked midnight meals, and stood quietly in the hallways of Graceland on the legend's last day. A farewell, quiet, but unforgettable. Before her death, Nancy Rooks, a former Graceland attendant, finally broke her decades-long silence about Elvis Presley. But what she said wasn't to rewrite history. She was simply to reshape it. Elvis wasn't a fallen king. He was a man trying to get back up again. And maybe, just maybe, he was close. In Nancy's mind, what happened to Elvis wasn't a tragic ending, but a door that closed halfway. And maybe, just maybe, he never really left. After Elvis died, Nancy stayed at Graceland, working the night shift for years afterward. When the tours ended and the house fell silent, or at least seemed to, Nancy continued to walk the grounds as a keeper of memories. In a rare interview, she shared something no one expected, something she had never said publicly. She believes Elvis's spirit is still here. "Yes, he is," she says calmly. "I used to work in the trophy room at night. When I was cleaning, the lights and things would flash as if he were teasing me." She doesn't try to make it dramatic. That's not how she tells the story. She just talks about how she feels and she's not alone. Other employees have shared similar experiences. But what's memorable about Nancy is the calmness with which she tells the story, as if she were talking about a stubborn former boss who still wouldn't leave his house. One night, she said, "I was taking a nap on the dais in the middle of the gallery where his uniforms and stage costumes were on display. I had just fallen asleep and someone shook my leg. I jumped up and there was no one there. I just said, Elvis, I know it was you. You did that to wake me up, didn't you? She laughed at the memory. I got up and left right away. I knew he was still around. For Nancy, this wasn't scary. It was familiar. It was Elvis, playful, approachable, never far away. She wasn't trying to create a myth. She wasn't suggesting he faked his death. She was just sharing something more subtle, a sense that Elvis had never quite left. Not Graceland, not the people who loved him, not the place he once called home. He loved this house, she said. He loved us. I don't think he really wanted to leave, not completely, and maybe in a way he still hasn't. And then the unexpected happened. When Nancy's last words began to circulate, they didn't make front pages. There were no headlines. There was no media frenzy. It started as a gentle ripple, whispers on fan forums, bits of chatter at Presley conventions, stories passed down among collectors, among hearts still aching for the legacy of a man who had been an era. But those who were paying attention immediately recognized that this was no old story. This was different. This was coming from someone who had lived in that house, who had been there for that fateful moment, and who had never sought the limelight. After nearly half a century of silence, she finally spoke. The initial public reaction was mixed. Some fans cried. They read her words and perhaps for the first time felt that they really understood Elvis, not the aloof icon, but a real person, fragile, complicated, and struggling. One woman wrote on a fan forum, "Nancy's words changed everything for me. I thought Elvis had given up. Now I see he was just tired of carrying everyone's expectations." But there were also skeptics. They asked, why now? Why not sooner? But even the most skeptical would have trouble denying one thing. Nancy had nothing to gain from what she said. She didn't sell her memories. She didn't chase a movie or book deal. She simply told them, and then quietly left not long after. Her words hung in the air like an unfinished riff from a song only she knew how to sing. In the Elvis scholarly and biographical community, Nancy's account provoked a quiet reflection. For decades, the official narrative had been simple. Elvis was in decline, addicted to drugs, and died too young, unable to escape the whirlwind of fame. But Nancy's account didn't deny the facts. It reshaped them. She didn't portray him as reckless. She saw him as exhausted but determined, as someone still thinking about change, not as someone who had given up. It was a different perspective, more human, more real. Some independent writers picked up on it. A few small magazines ran headlines like, "Is Elvis preparing an unexpected comeback?" and "The housekeeper who knew the king better than anyone else." But the mainstream media remained reticent. This was not a scandal. There was no sensational shock to exploit. No lawsuits, no new evidence, just a quiet account from a woman who had been there offering a different ending to a story everyone thought had been written. Still, among the devoted fan base, Nancy's words rekindled a deep interest in Elvis's final months. They began to re-watch old interviews, replay deleted scenes from his final performances, looking for signs, any signs, that Elvis might have had something more in mind than Graceland. The conversation shifted from how Elvis died to how he tried to live, and the shift was significant. It opened a space for hope, for the idea that Elvis wasn't just fading, he was fighting. Then people who knew Nancy, former employees, relatives, friends of the Presley family, began to speak out. Many confirmed she was always careful with her words. "She never spoke unless she had something to say," said a former colleague. "And if Nancy said Elvis wasn't ready to go, I believed her." Ultimately, what Nancy shared wasn't controversial. It was compassionate. It reminded us that legends aren't made overnight, and they don't end overnight. The truth that Nancy Rooks shares is not a world-shattering shock. It is gentler, but also truer. It does not change history by upending everything, but by opening up a new space for understanding Elvis, not as a man who collapsed under the weight of fame, but as a man who, even in his final moments, was reaching for something better. In the simple act of breaking her silence, Nancy gave Elvis a gift he rarely received in life: empathy for the person he was, not the icon the world had worshipped. Though Nancy spoke so much before her death, There were some things she carried with her forever. That is the nature of stories kept behind closed doors. They are shaped not only by what is revealed, but also by what remains unsaid. Graceland today is a museum, a sacred place for fans, a carefully preserved relic. But the real Graceland, a place of midnight music, awkward laughter, and moments of silence that Nancy described, lives only in the memories of those who once walked through those rooms, and most of them, like Nancy, are now gone. Her final words do not solve a mystery. Instead, they deepen it. For if Elvis had truly thought about starting over, if he had a desire to escape the wearying cycle, what kept him going? Had his health deteriorated beyond repair? Was he simply surrounded by too many people, each with their own expectations? Or worse, had he finally come to believe that the world would accept him only if he wore the crown, that there was no room for an ordinary, imperfect Elvis? Those questions still linger. Was there a missed conversation? A call that never came? Was there someone he wanted to see that night but didn't make it? Nancy's words conjure up an image of a man at the crossroads of decision and action, almost ready but never quite taking the step. And perhaps that truth has departed with him. What remains then is the testimony of a woman who saw it all, who kept silent for nearly 45 years and then finally chose to speak up. What she leaves behind is not accusation, not shocking secrets, but wisdom. In her eyes, Elvis was never a broken legend. He was a human being, complicated, tired, but never completely without hope. Perhaps that is the true legacy Nancy Rooks wants to leave, not a retread of history, but a gentle reminder that even those who wear crowns have simple dreams of liberation, of simply being human. And sometimes the most powerful stories come not from the loudest shouts, but from the whispers that have waited decades to be heard. If Elvis really had hoped to start over, to give up fame and just be a quiet man somewhere, what kept him going? And the bigger question, what would the world look like if Elvis Presley had lived to tell his own story? Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Hopefully today's story has given you a deeper and more human perspective on Elvis Presley, not just as a legend, but as a person. If you find the content meaningful, don't forget to leave a comment, share your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories. See you in the next video. Just an hour ago, in a shocking development, California Superior Court Judge Harrison Trent issued an arrest warrant for media personality Ellen DeGeneres after a previously unreleased audio recording of the late choreographer and executive producer Stephen Twitch Boss was played at the trial involving Sean Diddy Combs. The recording, described as new evidence, was unsealed and played to the entire courtroom, creating a shocking and tense atmosphere. According to legal sources, it is an encrypted voice memo that Twitch recorded just weeks before his death in December 2022. The arrest warrant is seen as a major turning point in the ongoing legal proceedings, showing that the case is expanding in scope and attracting attention from both the public and the global media. The audio recording, released for the first time in court yesterday, may force the public to rethink what was once considered a tragic suicide. What seemed to be a closed case is now revealing a much more complex picture, one that may involve factors far beyond the individual. The reaction was almost immediate. Legal teams were called in. Reporters were asked to leave the courtroom and then invited back. In the midst of the tension, Judge Harrison Trent, calm and composed, took just minutes to sign off on a federal arrest warrant for one of America's most influential television personalities. But what does the recording actually reveal? And why does it bring up Ellen DeGeneres? Let's start at the beginning. This is no accident. Those are the opening 4 words of the recording. Twitch's voice, slow, clear, and thoughtful, carries the air of someone who has decided to share the truth as a final act. I don't know who's going to hear this, he continues. But if they find me, if they say it was suicide, no. This is not random. He emphasizes that what's happening is the result of what he's seen, what he knows. What follows isn't a sudden explosion, but a trickle that, bit by bit, unfolds into a verbal map of stress, anxiety, and peculiar social events. Not regular parties, but after-midnight get-togethers, in hotels registered under fake corporate names. Places that, according to testimony, involved Sean Combs, who is now facing trial on felony charges related to organizing and facilitating extra-legal activities. "I was with Ellen," Twitch says in the recording. He describes being encouraged by Ellen's smile and reassurance that everyone in the room was safe. But that's not how he felt. Instead, he felt watched, put in a position where he couldn't back down. His voice wavers only once, but he remains remarkably calm. He never uses the words threat or blackmail, but what he says is enough to make it clear that he's talking about an invisible pressure, difficult to escape but clearly present. The death of Twitch, who was beloved as a co-star and creative director on The Ellen DeGeneres Show, sparked a global outpouring of grief in late 2022. Fans held vigils, fellow artists shared tributes, and social media was flooded with grief. The official report from authorities at the time ruled the death a suicide. A letter was found at the scene, but its contents were never made public. Investigators said at the time that it was about personal struggles, not unusual ones. But when the voice memo was played in court, a different picture began to emerge. Twitch described the growing unease he felt as he became more involved in social relationships he no longer controlled. His role alongside Ellen took him into closed environments where events were public on the surface, but behind them were hidden rules few outsiders knew about. He mentioned initials, ES, and a wealthy producer who owned a large house on the East Coast. More importantly, he talked about the midnight calls from unknown numbers asking him to attend secret events with promises of confidentiality, often without being allowed to read them in advance. And then, as a final exclamation point, Twitch left a line: "If anything happens, don't just look at Diddy." Over the years, Ellen DeGeneres has become a cultural icon with a positive image. From her roles as a comedian to a daytime host to a beloved activist. But this recording has put her name in the headlines again, this time not for her humor, but for the unanswered questions. But cracks began to appear in her image in 2020, when a series of former employees came forward to accuse her of serious problems, from pressure to discrimination. Ellen issued a public apology. Despite the show's declining ratings, her brand remained strong. Now, that brand is facing greater challenges, as live audio suggests Ellen was not just an outsider, but an active participant in environments Twitch once felt unsafe in. "I was with her," Twitch says in the recording. "She said everything was fine, but I think she knew better. I knew better." After the tape was released, several former employees came forward anonymously, revealing that they had been instructed not to ask about Ellen's personal relationships with several prominent industry figures, including Diddy. Others described an atmosphere of intense surveillance and tight control, not only during the show's peak, but also after it ends in 2022. Judge Harrison Trent, who has experience handling high-profile cases, did not rush to approve Ellen's arrest warrant. Court records show that before the recordings were released, federal investigators began tracking Ellen's financial transactions and travel history, connecting her to multiple secret meetings hosted by Diddy between 2019 and 2021. Two of those events coincided with locations described by witnesses as after-hours rooms, where cell phones were banned, employees worked in shifts, and security was provided by unidentified third-party companies. According to testimony, Twitch was allegedly invited directly by Ellen to such an intimate event. "It's not the show," Twitch says on the recording. "She was not the usual Ellen that night." As news of the arrest spread, public opinion was divided. Some fans continued to support Ellen, highlighting her years of charitable contributions and social activism. Meanwhile, many others on social media used the hashtag #JusticeForTwitch to call for transparency and accountability, not only for Ellen, but also for an entertainment industry that has long been suspected of protecting powerful individuals. At this point, Ellen's legal team has denied all allegations. Although no arrests have been made, sources close to the matter say that authorities are still in contact and continuing to investigate. Behind it all, there is still a haunting truth. The man who once brought laughter to millions may have died trying to say something many never wanted to hear. Stephen Twitch's boss may have died trying to convey an uncomfortable truth, opening a shocking twist in the unraveling case. Back in the courtroom, less than 24 hours after Judge Harrison Trent signed an arrest warrant for Ellen DeGeneres, the prosecution quickly introduced new evidence directly related to the first recording. The case now extends beyond Twitch's words to what he left behind. For the first time, the court heard a second recording titled The Final Draft. 4E audio analysts confirmed that the recording was recorded just 3 days before Twitch died. His tone had changed dramatically from a simple confession to a farewell. "I tried to believe you," he said. "I really tried. A lot of people exaggerate and disappear because they want to. But I know that's not true. I know what I saw. I know who was there. If you're listening to this, it's probably too late." And with those words, the tone in the courtroom changed completely. Because it wasn't just Twitch's words that were being said, it was the specifics: dates, locations, and flight numbers. 2 of those flights matched parties involving Sean Diddy Combs, one of whom had personally brought Ellen. Investigators traced Ellen's private flights to Los Angeles on 2 key weekends, December 11th, 2021 and April 9th, 2022. While her public schedule suggested she was resting or working remotely, hotel staff at the Highland Viceroy confirmed that a penthouse suite had been booked under a false name, linked to one of Ellen's front companies. The suite was on the same floor as Diddy's event venue. There were even more questionable guest records that had never been released, with Stephen Boss listed as an entertainer. "We were following Diddy, not expecting Ellen to come up, but the paperwork was too obvious to ignore," a source close to the investigation told our team. At the same time, Twitch's widow, Allison Hulker, also drew attention. The public once saw her as a grieving mother struggling with an unimaginable loss. But after prosecutors revealed sealed financial records, a new layer of mystery was revealed. Allison reportedly signed a settlement with an unnamed entertainment entity just weeks after Twitch's death, described as a division of inheritance. The total amount was more than $3.2 million. Allison's spokesperson said it was a structured settlement involving residual income and estate management, but legal experts were quick to raise questions. "No one pays more than $3 million without a hush money," said entertainment attorney Rel Barnes. "That figure suggests that this was a hush money before a lawsuit could happen." The court has now subpoenaed all communications between Allison and her attorneys from November 2022 to March 2023. As the information has come out, former Ellen DeGeneres employees have begun to break the silence. 3 former producers who spoke on condition of anonymity have shared similar stories. They described secret conversations around Ellen's private guests and private after-hours parties where the crew was told not to ask questions, a culture where silence became an integral part of the job. One of them recalled a somber moment in the show's final season when Twitch arrived late, didn't say much, just sat there and stared at the floor. When Ellen asked, "Are you okay?" he replied, "Depends on who's watching." Court records show that Twitch left behind a total of 3 audio files. The third, which has yet to be played, is titled, "If They Say I Gave Up." Judge Trent said the file would be admitted once its relevance and authenticity are no longer in dispute. In the meantime, speculation has mounted. Metadata suggests the file was recorded just 12 hours before Twitch died. Sources close to the family confirmed that the audio file was stored on a secure drive that had just been forensically unlocked. The FBI has declassified its contents. Still, 2 quotes from the file have leaked. "I love my family, I love dancing, but they'll say I gave up." And that's the most painful part of this story. Since the arrest warrant was made public, Ellen has remained steadfastly silent, with no official statement. Her legal team has been quick to push back, calling the allegations deeply false and unfounded. But outside her Montecito mansion, silence has reigned. There have been no moves, no planned events, and no rebuttals from Ellen herself. That silence, once her trademark, has now become the loudest voice in the case. The trial is scheduled to resume Monday, when prosecutors push for the third memo to be released in public. Meanwhile, Ellen's legal team is trying to block it, citing privacy and legal reasons. No longer a canceled talk show, Ellen DeGeneres has become a symbol of a story about a shattered image. Twitch CEO Steven is gone, but his real voice is finally being heard. And for the first time in years, Ellen may no longer have a microphone in her hand. The reaction to her confession was not relief, but deep division. Her well-worded admission did little to quell the outcry. Within hours of the video going live, social media was abuzz with demands for greater accountability. Headlines became more strident, demanding that Ellen take responsibility. But has the system really changed? That night, a crowd gathered outside Warner Brothers studios not to protest against an individual, but to mourn the illusion that many have believed for years. The signs that read, "He dances for you to laugh. You look away when he cries," and the candles that were lit were not about punishment, but about justice. Within the legal realm, prosecutors did not hesitate. They shifted the investigation, turning it from a personal scandal into a story about the culture of cover-ups in the entertainment industry. The investigation expanded beyond Ellen, beyond Diddy, into the ecosystem that had created the years-long silence. Talent agents were subpoenaed. Partygoers, executives, entertainment lawyers, and even city officials were called in for private testimony. Some began to cooperate, and new documents began to emerge. Hidden deep in the metadata of Twitch's cloud storage, once ignored by family and authorities, was a folder called Holding and Silence Agreement. It contained scanned NDAs, timestamps, signatures, and shocking email chains between assistants and PR teams discussing how to handle the media if Twitch ever revealed the truth. "If he talks about mental health, we have a plan to use it," an anonymous email to the public relations firm read. The trial is no longer just a trial. It is peeling back the layers of Hollywood's social fabric. Amid the escalating legal drama, another name has suddenly resurfaced: Diddy. After a period of silence, he has filed a motion with his legal team requesting immunity from cooperating in the case. Diddy's legal team argues that while he hosted the parties, the expectations and pressure were created by others. The implication is that Diddy was not the only one controlling the dark activities that took place in the middle of the night. In an internal document leaked from the court, Diddy not only tried to deflect blame but also directly named Ellen, not just as a guest, but as someone who actively recruited guests. According to the filing, Ellen's role extended to introducing guests, specifically artists, assistants, and even dancers who sought opportunities from her influence. One name in particular stood out to investigators: Stephen Boss. Now it's no longer a theory, but a lawsuit in the making, revolving around how Twitch was strategically invited, comforted, and then left unprotected when it came to so much. On social media, the public reaction has been swift. Support has turned to deep sadness, sympathy to rage. A new hashtag has exploded globally in a matter of hours: "He tried to leave." And Allison Hulker, after days of media silence, finally spoke out. Not in a studio, but outside the courtroom. Flanked by Stephen's legal team and family, she read a brief statement: "He's not broken, he's betrayed." Allison insists Stephen wasn't depressed. He was simply disillusioned. He loved life, but not one he was forced to endure in silence. His only mistake was believing that kindness wouldn't be mistaken for consent. The statement ended with a call for a formal investigation into whether Stephen Boss was coerced, threatened, or drugged in his final days. The motion was filed the same day. Shortly afterwards, surveillance video from a hotel room involving a third party was released, showing Stephen entering with a clear expression of stress. Next to him was Ellen. Although there was no sound, the body language between them was clear. Stephen shook his head. Ellen gestured for him to come down. He turned away. She touched his arm lightly. He stiffened. The last time they were seen together in public was 3 days later, in a cheerful social media post celebrating the show's final episode. Forensic experts are now using lip reading to decipher the elevator video. For Ellen, who has admitted moral responsibility, the transition from insinuation to suspicion of guilt has crossed a critical line. Her legal team is negotiating a reduced sentence in exchange for full cooperation in the expanding investigation. Behind closed doors, she has provided her identity, affiliation, private transportation services, and secret investors. In the process, another shocking detail has come to light. Ellen recorded a private confession video months before the scandal broke. The video, which had never been made public and was never intended to be made public, was stored on an encrypted drive that would only be unlocked if she legally surrendered it. It was titled, "If They Ask." In the video, she says in a choked voice, "I told him it would be okay. I told him to stop asking because I was scared too. I didn't kill him, but I didn't let anyone help him." The tape was played in a closed-door, off-camera session, but its impact was felt across every level of the entertainment industry. Streaming networks suspended their talk shows for reevaluation, public relations firms began to distance themselves from high-profile talent, and many celebrity-related organizations publicly apologized for their ignorance. The cultural shift wasn't just happening, it was accelerating. Through all of this, the world finally heard the unfiltered, uncensored voice of a man who had spent his entire career dancing for others. He didn't fade away, he didn't fall, he rose. When he spoke, the walls began to crumble. The days ahead would be a challenge for the entertainment industry like never before. This is not just a scandal, but a total collapse. Not a mere cancellation, but a full-blown confrontation. The simmering, now undeniable truth is tearing apart decades of contracts that have protected the glitz and glamour of institutions. The public demands more than accountability. They want sweeping change, and so the consequences are getting worse. The California State Attorney's Office, under intense pressure, has confirmed it has opened a formal investigation into the use of coercive NDAs in the entertainment ecosystem, focusing on the silencing of employees, contractors, and performers. The focus of the investigation is the Ellen DeGeneres Show, the production companies involved, and more than a dozen guest lists associated with what the media has dubbed the Midnight Runway. Amid the legal chaos, the personal toll is mounting. Allison Hulker, already under pressure from the media, revealed that her family had received anonymous threats. Her children were pulled out of school after paparazzi stalked their home. In a joint statement with her attorney, she asked for privacy, warning, "Those who want to cover up the truth have not given up. They have lost their shield and now they are going after witnesses." She wasn't exaggerating. In just 1 week, 2 former Diddy event aides recanted their statements. One claimed to have been threatened, the other disappeared from social media. Meanwhile, a prominent Hollywood damage control expert was found to have deleted numerous documents and images from her online servers. When questioned by a federal investigator, she invoked her Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. The cold reality set in. The truth Twitch had tried to expose was not only unpleasant, but dangerous. But more courageous voices were beginning to speak up. An anonymous letter to the court, stamped with Nevada seals and carefully handwritten but unsigned, detailed a similar party in 2017. The victim was an unnamed young actor. The details of the letter matched Twitch's recording. A darkened penthouse being asked to surrender her phone, and Ellen showing up late but still giving directions to the room. The letter ended with the words, "I thought I was alone. Now I know I'm not." Through handwriting and metadata verification, the letter became a major turning point. It reinforced fears that Twitch was not alone, nor would it be the last. In response, an independent panel, the Artist Integrity Review Board, made up of legal experts, former artists, and trauma experts, was created to develop a system for recording abuse without fear of retaliation. For the first time, a secure channel was created for stories to come to light, and a flood of accounts emerged. So many, in fact, that a backlog built up in just a few weeks. As for Ellen, her silence was now protected by strict legal restrictions. She was formally charged with obstruction of justice and conspiracy to conceal evidence. What changed public perception, however, was not the indictment but the sentencing. In the dock, Ellen did not read from a script, nor did she let her attorney speak for her. She stepped to the microphone, paused, and said, "I stopped listening when I should have started. I laughed when I should have asked questions, and I will carry that with me for the rest of my life." No tears, no defense, just one final statement before she was led from the courtroom. Ellen was sentenced to 2 years in prison, along with a trial accountability program that included financial restitution to victims and mandatory cooperation in further investigations. Some called it leniency, others called it restrained justice. But for those closest to Stephen Boss, it was a different story. On Twitch's 42nd birthday, a public memorial was held in downtown Los Angeles. Thousands gathered. Dancers from across the industry performed routines inspired by him. Some carried on the music he helped create, others used body language to express words that were never spoken. Allison took the stage not to mourn, but to speak the truth. He was more than a name in the newspaper, more than a hashtag. He was a father, a creator, a friend to so many of us. Today we dance not because he is gone, but because he finally told his story and the world listened. From the crowd, a shout rang out, "He didn't give up!" And the words echoed loudly, echoing through the streets. He didn't give up. In that moment, the story was rewritten forever. Stephen Boss will no longer be remembered as the man who fell, but as the man who broke the veil of silence. Thank you all for watching the video until the end. Your interest and support are the motivation for me to continue creating more quality content. If you find the video useful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the latest videos. I look forward to receiving feedback and opinions from you to improve more and more. Wishing everyone good health, joy,